Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Preparations are well underway for 2025, and over the last couple of days we've seen multiple rumours on what Ferrari, Red Bull and McLaren are cooking up with their 2025 challenges. Mercedes, though, there's some very interesting information on what they are looking to change if there's any hope of George Russell or even Andrea Kimi Antonelli competing for next year's driver's title. Multiple changes, especially to the rear axle, one feature that Hamilton complained massively about the car over the last couple of years. Will they be competitive enough, though, because there are rumours they're already looking towards 2026 and doing some experiments with that car, which may help them in the long run, but potentially not for the immediate term. Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty as ever to get into today just before we get to Christmas. Preparations underway in Australia, by the way. This is Melbourne. Of course, the first Grand Prix of the season is still a long way off, probably a good couple of months away, but Albert Park is getting ready to see Formula 1's return. Of course, famously for the first Grand Prix of the season, yet again, Bahrain and Jeddah moved back for a couple of reasons, I believe mainly Ramadan potentially related this year, and Melbourne is once again going to open the Formula 1 season to the delight of many. Quickly on Aston Martin, they are bringing Enrico Cardile into the team, we think, in January. Of course, former Ferrari man. They managed to get him to leave, paid him a big bag basically, and he's gone over there to Aston. Dan Fallows has been, well, they say repositioned. I mean, he's basically been axed from his role after his head of development position has been an absolute shambles over the last couple of years. So Cardile is joining, Newey is joining Newey's joining I think maybe in February, March time. Cardile is joining January. And their new wind tunnel is apparently going to be operational in February. So, look, Aston have not had a great 18 months of development, 24 months of development really, since what happened at the start of 2023, where they were mesmerizingly good. But, they were excellent at the start of 23. We've got to give them credit for that. But equally, Mercedes and, McLaren, massively dropped the ball at the start of that season. And obviously Ferrari as well, to be honest, at the start of 23. So, once those guys got back to being reasonably competitive, Aston Martin fell off. But of course, it wasn't just Aston Martin getting caught up. They also themselves brought a series of terrible upgrade packages, which they believe that Newey and Cardile will be able to arrest. But nonetheless, they will be reliant on some of their new technology, which is going to be online in the next couple of months. They have no rookies at Aston Martin this year because they've not made any driver lineup changes. These are the numbers. I know that it interests many people to know which driver numbers are being used here. So Hadjar's number 6, Jack Doohan is getting number 7, Kimi Antonelli with number 12, Ollie Bearman is number 87, and then of course Gabriel Bortoleto number 5. Of course, famously Sebastian Vettel's number, right? And Bortoletto's going to be taking that one over for now. I think it was even the number that maybe Carlos Sainz wanted, but he ended up with 55 instead, given what was happening at the time. But no, Bortoletto's going to have the number 5, so that's all now locked in going into the new season. Couple of quick things on Red Bull, as always. Marco and Horner have been very explicit about Checo costing them the championship. They're not wrong, but it's easy to say it after you fired him, I guess. It's a shame, it hurt. The tip of the scales was the difference between Max and Checo in the World Cup was 282 points, while the difference among the drivers of the competition is much smaller. That explains why we lost the Constructors' Championship. And he also commented on the difficulty of going back to back to back to back to back for Max Verstappen. And, he says this: we're entering our 5th title year, potentially, with Max. So far, we managed 4 titles with Seb and with Max. The 5th one seems to be particularly difficult. So we'll see this year, of course. In Vettel's case, he ended his 4-year run in 2013, the final year of those regulations, and in 2014, sure, Ricciardo came along and did a stellar job against Vettel to the surprise of many, but that car wasn't winning the championship anyway, so it frankly didn't matter on some level to Seb. Whereas, of course, next year, it's still the same regulation cycle for now, and then of course in 26, that's when things change. But he says we want to complete our races again in the usual Red Bull efficiency and with ease, which is kind of an interesting statement because there's been a feeling certainly for Max that it's not been as clear-cut by any means from the Red Bull racing team. Hungary especially was an absolute shambles, really. Not just from Max's side, but also from the way the team were executing. And of course, things are far easier when you have the best car by miles. You can basically do whatever you want on strategy, and it's perfectly fine. But clearly, as the cars have got more competitive, Red Bull have not been able to just easily dominate the Grand Prix with no effort at all. I mean, it seems like the efficiency they'd built up over years battling Mercedes for the constructors was finally paying off big time when they got the car advantage. And to be fair, it did. But, I mean, even over the last few rounds of the season, it's not like all of their pit stops have been stellar as well. They've had their mistakes thrown into there as well. I think even Vasseur made this point that Verstappen and Red Bull, you put them under pressure, it's more likely they will yield and they will break to some degree than, of course, it has been in the past. Now, Yuki Tsunoda is not getting the drive. I just thought one more thing to annoy you guys that are frustrated with the way that Red Bull have dealt with this guy is the following. So, just because Yuki had offers elsewhere, now I'm not saying Red Bull have necessarily done anything wrong in terms of the way that they've handled this. I get why Red Bull have done it the way that they have, but it doesn't mean that it's not frustrating that Yuki's been dealt with in this way, and obviously he can't be happy about it either, because he is quite useful to Red Bull, frankly. He is a good benchmark. They bring somebody into RB. If he beats them, certainly convincingly, they're not good enough. If he loses to them or it's reasonably competitive, they might be good enough, especially in Lawson's case, they don't have much experience. But for whatever reason, they don't want to give him the starting drive. And it was talked about in this article today that Alpine, Sauber, as in Audi, and Haas all spoke to his management at the start of this season and offered him long-term contracts. So there were 3 teams that were ready to go, getting Tsunoda out of his deal, giving him a long-term arrangement. Now, Sauber, I mean, look, of those 3 teams, which of those teams could still be interested today? Kind of difficult to say. I mean, Haas have got Ocon locked down now. I think Ocon's pretty good. I wouldn't be jumping, at the bits, let's say chomping at the bit or whatever, to drop Ocon for Tsunoda. And you're not getting rid of Behrman because he's obviously a promising youngster. He's a rookie and he's got Ferrari connections and I'm sure they want him to be in the car. Then obviously the Sauber piece is like they've kind of got their thing locked down. Hulkenberg, they're going to want to keep around, you'd imagine. Excellent qualifier, German driver. And they've got Bortoletto, similar story, of course, to what Haas have done. Alpine are the only one I'd say that are still potentially an interesting candidate team. I mean, it would have been immense to have Gasly and Tsunoda at Alpine. Maybe we still will if Doohan doesn't deliver and, Alpine don't seem too convinced by Doohan so far, but of course we'll see. They've also got Paul Aron though in the sidelines waiting to get a drive. So it's not clear if Yuki is going to be going anywhere going forwards. But it is frustrating to think that Red Bull, we know that they were never going to give him the drive. Like it's a known thing. There was talk from his former manager, this decision was made months and months ago that Yuki wasn't getting the drive. But yet he had offers from Alpine, from Audi, from Haas to go and, to give him longer term deals at those teams, and Red Bull refused to let him go. And then, of course, they're keeping him around, but not giving him what he wants, really. Now, does Yuki really want to go to those teams? No, probably not. He wants to go to a better team, but that is where we find ourselves right now. And if you look at the grid in 2026, assuming that Horner follows through on his word and says, well, no point keeping Yuki around anymore if he's always going to be the bridesmaid, which, of course, is Red Bull's own doing, but whatever, that's what he said. If they drop him, where does Yuki actually go? I'd say Alpine seems like one of the only reasonable candidates as it stands. Haas, they did an excellent job this year. They actually scored more points this year than the last 4 years combined, which is kind of remarkable. But they're not going to be winning next year's championship. That will be determined between, you'd imagine, the 4 best teams of this season. 2 of which won a championship this year. Max won the drivers for Red Bull, McLaren won the constructors for McLaren. But Ferrari will look to break their drought next year. Of course, McLaren, the last time they won the constructors, then Ferrari went on a tear and won it for a number of times in a row. And Ferrari are very well positioned in the constructors because of the strength of their driver lineup. That actually probably hurts them, though, from the drivers' championship perspective, if it's going to be as competitive as we may believe it could be. So let's talk about Mercedes, because they dominated this sport for many a year with Lewis Hamilton. He, of course, is now on his way out to Ferrari, and Mercedes have George Russell, who beat Hamilton pretty emphatically this year in some respect anyway, certainly in qualifying, and Kimi Antonelli, who had an interesting debut over the last couple of months when he crashed in Monza but was still considered to be in good spirits and very highly valued still by Mercedes. Now, Russell should have no issues handling Antonelli as a rookie for the season, but of course the talk on Russell has been if Antonelli impresses, does reasonably well, and then Verstappen wants to leave Red Bull because they've fallen off considerably and maybe their 2026 project isn't looking so good, that's when Russell's situation comes into question. But this is what the article from the Italian press was discussing on Mercedes and a few of the details as well. So James Allison is still, their technical director, but Simone Resta, so he was former Ferrari man. This is actually him on the left-hand side here. And I think he went to work for Haas for a little bit. Known, obviously, look, all these guys supremely talented engineers, but obviously there's been some questions after he was not removed, I think precisely, but after he departed the Ferrari project as to whether he wasn't exactly ticking all the boxes. And of course Loic Serra went from Mercedes to Ferrari the other way, so there's obviously been a lot of talk about the quality of the engineering talent and what that's going to mean. However, they obviously are working on improvements to the W15. Last year's car, occasionally in the cooler conditions, circuits obviously like Silverstone and Spa where they won, Austria they won, but it was only down to the front two guys crashing into each other. But as the article described, the engineer from Imola reunites with the English technical director who he had begun to appreciate during James's experience at Ferrari, because of course Allison used to work at Ferrari as well. It is easy to predict that the Silver Arrow will change its appearance, even if Simone should have worked specifically on the 2026 car potentially. The exit of Loic Serra, who chose Ferrari, probably changed some priorities, but even in Brackley they are betting on a paradigm shift. Who will have made the right choice? So there is a feeling that Mercedes are more focused in general on the 2026 car rather than for next year's car. Doesn't mean they're not going to make a great car for next year. They may well do that. But there is discussions in the media that it's really 2026 where Mercedes are putting their full focus into getting back on top. I think they also believe they have an incredibly strong engine program for 2026 lined up. And I think they want to get everything back on track in 26 and try and repeat what they did in 2014. Now, of course, Ferrari will have other ideas, but it does seem like Ferrari are putting more energy into this year's car than the year after. Now, technically, Mercedes aren't allowed to work on the 2026 car until the start of January. But, we know that in reality, it doesn't always work like that. And there are certain ideas that can be carried over regardless. So there's been a feeling that they've put a lot of resources towards the W16. These are the latest theories on what they're going to do. But as I say, this piece here as well, it's kind of unclear exactly who the sources are. Mercedes AMG Passion Club say these information pieces here come from directly, basically sources they have within the team. So take it with a pinch of salt, but this does align with what we've seen elsewhere. Many tests, though, that are being carried out will also be for the W17, which of course is going to be the first year's car of the 2026 circular regulations. So they say the following: the floor that they're going to have on the W16 is going to be pretty much the same, not the same, but it's going to be 50% the same as what they brought on this year, I guess. So yeah, 50% new one, or the team saw that Austin spec a lot more potential, just needs some tweaks. So Mercedes seem confident that the new floor is working as intended. It didn't really seem so much like that was the case when it arrived on the W15, but of course the W16 will be a different car, so maybe the similar floor on that car works much better. And this is the complexity of aerodynamics, I guess. Now, the rear axle has been plaguing Mercedes now for some years. Pretty much the entirety of the ground effect era, Hamilton was not happy with the instability of the rear, and Russell could handle it a bit better, but it was still causing both of them to have their issues. And even once they brought the new floor, if anything, it made it worse. You guys remember in Austin and other races around there when both of the guys were just losing the rear inexplicably. Of course, both very talented drivers, but not able to deal with what the W15 was throwing them at many times. And it seems like in the high temperatures, and the rear tyres wearing out was a massive issue. So not even just the instability on the rear axle, but also just the the high temperatures and the massive deg they were getting at the rear of the car. Looks like there's going to be many mechanical changes. They have done some tweaks to the front wing, again, you'd imagine, and they're tweaking the front and the rear suspension. There's even a talk of changing to a pull rod, as of course we have seen with, talked about by Ferrari recently, copying the more McLaren and Red Bull approach instead. But it's interesting that this data generally, or this information, is talking about tweaks, right? We're not talking about a brand new overreaching concept like obviously McLaren are even talking about, but certainly Ferrari are saying they're going to change basically everything. Mercedes are saying, all right, our car was fundamentally not great, but not that bad always. And the Mercedes, when it worked, it really worked, right? I mean, in Las Vegas, it was ridiculous how much quicker than it was than everyone else. So I get where Mercedes are coming from, right? It's interesting, though, to look at the field and wonder, if you had to predict, based on the placings last season, which teams would try and innovate massively and build a new car from the ground up, and which teams would evolve their car concept, you'd probably expect Mercedes to be the ones making the big, innovations and the big risk taking, really. But actually, it seems like it's almost the other way around. Mercedes are like, look, we're just going to make our car better from last year in various ways and make it effectively just more consistent, because if they could unlock that Silverstone, I mean, especially Spa and Las Vegas, if they could somehow unlock that performance, and a lot of it comes from how they treat their tyres, but if they could unlock that type of level more consistently, they could win the championship. I mean, that is absolutely not impossible. So I do understand Mercedes' perspective, and also because at the end of the day they were fourth, jumping from fourth to first is a big challenge in the same set of regulations, given they've not really got that close to winning it at all over the last few years in this cycle. So it's also understandable for them that they're more interested in 26, because next year's chances of winning are probably slimmer anyway than for their opposition, whereas for Red Bull, for Ferrari, for McLaren, winning the drivers anyway is such a big priority, because next year it's a super attainable priority. 2026 is still a bit of a question mark. Got to wonder about engines, got to worry about consistency and reliability, and these other factors as well. I'd very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments below. Who's got the right approach, I guess, is my fundamental question. Is it the right decision for Ferrari, McLaren, and seemingly Red Bull to make widespread changes, or have Mercedes actually got it right, taking their current car concept, making some substantial tweaks, but tweaks nonetheless, and try and make it a much more competitive car for next season? A more consistent car is what Mercedes will be hoping for. Even if it is their driver pairing good enough to execute on it? That will be a question mark compared to their competition. But very much interested your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.
For me, that was very surprising. It almost feels like he expects a double standard, and if it's not going his way, then there's no way. Because he was expecting me to say, no problem. Now he's made it personal, and someone needs to stand up to a bully like this. And so far, people have let him get away with murder.